You are on.
All right, thank you, Mr. Beta. Let's call the meeting for Public Works and Utilities Committee for July 6th to order. Can we have a roll call, please, Ms. Martin?
Yes, sir. Councilor Christopher Rivera,
Here.
Councilor Romana Beta,
Here.
Sidney Lindell,
Here.
Councilor Joanne Beal Coupler,
Here.
Councilor Michael Garcia.
Present.
You have a quorum, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. Approval of the agenda. Any changes from staff?
Mr. Chair, no formal changes, although additional information was handed out for item B. So I want to just verify that all of you guys received that additional information.
How was it sent out, John?
I believe Emily sent it out. It was a spreadsheet that Mr. Fitch wanted to add to his presentation.
Okay, did all the counselors get that? All committee members?
I got it.
Councilor Lindell saying yes. Councilor Garcia?
Do you know when it was sent?
Mr. Flitch?
Oh, I see. It was this morning. I do have it, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
All right. Councilor Beta, you have it?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
All right, so we have that. Anything from you, Mr. Jones?
Nothing from me, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
All right, what are the wishes of the committee with approval of the agenda?
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion for approval from Councilor Beta, second from Councilor Vihil Coppler. Can we have a roll call, please, Ms. Martin?
Yes, sir. Chair Christopher Rivera,
Yes.
Councilor Romana Beta,
Yes.
Councilor Sidney Lindell,
Yes. Councilor
Councilor Joanne Beal Coupler,
Yes.
Councilor Michael Garcia.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Next, we're on to the consent calendar. Any changes from staff? Mr. Jones?
There are no changes from me, Chair. Thank you.
Mr. Romero?
No changes, Mr. Chair.
All right, so I have from Councilor Vihil Coppler, she would like to remove items A, C, and D. Councilor Lindell would like to remove item B. So we have A, B, C, and D. Councilor Garcia, would you like to remove anything?
Item C as well.
Councilor Beta?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, so we have items, Councilor Vihil Coppler and Councilor Lindell, anything added to your items you'd like to pool, or are we good with what you sent me earlier?
I'm fine. Chair.
All right, we're good with there. So items A, B, C, and D have been removed from the agenda. So what are the wishes of the committee with approval of the consent?
Move to approve as amended.
Second.
A motion for approval is amended by Councilor Vihil Coppler, a second by Councilor Lindell. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Chair Christopher Rivera,
Yes.
Councilor Romana Beta,
Yes.
Councilor Sidney Lindell,
Yes.
Councilor Joanne Beal Coupler,
Yes.
Councilor Michael Garcia.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Next, we have approval of the minutes from June 22nd, 2020, Public Works and Utilities Committee meeting. Any changes from staff? Mr. Romero?
No changes, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Jones?
No changes, Mr. Chair.
All right, any changes from the committee? Wishes of the committee?
Move to approve the minutes, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Second.
A motion for approval of the minutes from Councilor Garcia, a second from Councilor Vihil Coppler. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Chair Christopher Rivera,
Yes.
Councilor Romana Beta,
Yes.
Councilor Sidney Lindell,
Yes.
Councilor Joanne Beal Coupler,
Yes.
Councilor Michael Garcia.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. Next, we're on to public comment. Ms. Pisula, do you have anything that has been sent in written form that you need to share with us?
No, Mr. Chair, but the individual waiting on the attendee list, his name is Mark Hoyt. I apologize if I mispronounced it.
Ms. Pasula, how do you spell his last name?
Dhoyt.
Thank you.
MARC.
Thank you.
All right, Ms. Ray Diaz, anything in written form that you need to share with us?
No, Mr. Chair, nothing in written form.
All right, Mr. Abeta, if you can let Mr. Hoyt on for 2 minutes, and you may need to cut him off at those 2 minutes once they're up.
Yes, sir. Here you go. Mr. Choi, you can speak. You need to unmute your mic. There you go.
Can you hear me right now?
Yes, sir.
Yes, Mr. If you can identify yourself and state your name and address for the record, and then you have 2 minutes to
Can I
address.
just adjust my computer before you start my 2 minutes, please, so I can hear you guys?
Sure.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. And again, this is your ability or your time to make comment to us. You can't ask us any questions.
Right.
We won't address you back, but you can give us your point of view on whatever you want in a 2 minute time period.
Okay. Committee, councilors, thank you so much for this opportunity. I know some of you, I've been in this community over 30 years. I own a small business with several employees that has contributed millions of dollars to our economic benefit here. I'd like to just
Need his address, please.
my address is 1709 Artistic Lane. I'd like to talk about just a few points. First thing, regarding the upcoming Airbnb ordinance, there has not been adequate stakeholder engagement. Specifically, I was never emailed, I was never notified, and huge numbers of people, everybody who's an Airbnb host should have been emailed. And that was did not happen, and that is a really bad flaw. But the most important flaw with what planning land use is doing right now is that they have no economic analysis. They don't have economic data. So they don't know like how many people in Airbnb are perhaps like homeowners trying to pay their mortgage, or like myself, well, I did it, which is like trying to pay off mortgage or plan for my retirement. And they don't know how many are people who are property management companies. And so the analysis isn't really based upon economic development or the actual economics. And I really appeal to you, councilors, to make your decision based on the actual economic analysis. And this came out in planning. Secondly, in addition to that, why is there such a rush to get this done when there's been a completely like flat Airbnb in the city? It's hardly grown for 2 years. Why isn't there a rush and priority to plug the holes of the 1,500 Airbnbs that have been illegal in this community? Because what's happening right now is people who are doing it right are penalized, and there's no analysis of like how those 1,500 are impacting the views of land use. And the director of land use even made the misassumption that Airbnbs are impacting short-term housing rentals, and that was proven in the land. That's a misassumption. So essentially, instead of taking analysis and working from analysis, they're taking from assumptions, and they're not listening to people, and they're not making economic decisions that are based upon facts. So as a result, their policy needs to slow down, and it needs to be based and grounded upon economic data instead of on the assumptions that are not linked to the economy of our city. And I just want to say that like the small Airbnbs, they're basically small businesses. What?
Your time is up.
Your time is up. Thank you for your comments. We do appreciate them. And like I said,
Can I have another 30 seconds?
No, I'm sorry. They will be put into the record. And I appreciate you coming on and speaking about this. Thank you. Thank you, Joe.
Yes, sir.
All right, now we're
Mr.
on.
Chair?
Yes.
If Mr. Choi has the rest of his statement, is it okay if he emails it to the committee members?
Yes, definitely. If he's still on, if you would like to submit your written comments to us, is it okay to send it to you, Ms. Pisola?
Yes, that's fine.
And Ms.
Alright.
Pasola, would you send it to me as well, Elizabeth?
Yeah, I will send it to everyone once I receive it.
Yes, Mr. Choi. So you can send your written statement in its entirety to EK Pisula, Pisula, at santafenm.gov.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I don't see that he's still on our video stuff.
Ms. Pisula, can you reach out to him? I assume he has logged on with some email address that we had to respond back to him with the Zoom address. So if we can reach out to him and let him know that he has that ability.
Yes, I will.
Great, thank you. All right, we're on to the consent agenda, item A. Councilor Lindell, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm having difficulty downloading on the PrimeGov meeting viewer on the item that I had pulled, which is item B. I'm having a hard time pulling the information that was sent to us earlier by Brad. Could someone indicate to me what time the email was sent by him today so that I can pull it up on email? Thank you, Councilor Garcia. Do you see it?
Councilor Lindell, it's at 11:14 a.m. And then there was an additional email at 9:22 a.m.
All right, no wonder I couldn't see it. Mine showed as it was from Emily. Appreciate it. Thank you, Chair.
Very good, thank you. Thank you both. Thank you, Councilor Garcia. So we're on to item A, requesting approval for amendment number 2 to professional services agreement with Canyon Cochran Management Services. Councilor Vihil Coppler, you pull this item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I pulled this item because I think I do understand what this requester is requesting. The documents and the order of the layout and the lack of a cover memo are very hard to understand. The only cover memo I found was dated 2013. And I don't know why there's no cover memo explaining what exactly it is they want. And I realize there's a professional services agreement, but it doesn't answer the questions that normally a cover memo would answer. So I know the request is for something like 199,000, but I don't know, judging by these attachments, I don't know what that means in relation to the entire contract. And so that's what I want an explanation on.
Very good, Mr. Flitch.
Good evening, Chairman, councilors. Actually, if it would be an identical memo to the one on item B.
But we are on item A.
I know. But I'm saying is that there is a cover memo. I don't know why it's not attached. It is identical to the cover memo on item B. It's just asking for a 1-year renewal of our, in this case, not our broker, but our third-party administrator. It's we've had an 8-year contract. We would like to renew that contract for 1 year due to the pandemic and all these other interesting things that occupied. We didn't really have time for an RFP. I'm asking for it to do a 1-year extension. And then we would have an RFP for these services for FY22 and for a 4-year contract. So this is all because I didn't get the RFP done for this and item B.
Okay, so you're asking for 198,000 and that's for 1 year?
Correct.
And what
they
is
administer
the term of
all
the
of our workers' compensation claim.
Mr. Chair, if we could not speak over each other, it's hard to.
I'm sorry.
Damn it. Go ahead, Counselor Viejo Cobbler. Can you restate your question?
Well, I want to know what the term of the original contract, I guess, expired June 30th. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
And so was that a 4-year contract or a 3-year contract or what was
An
that?
8-year contract.
An 8-year contract. And what was the original amount of the contract?
$155,737.
So we are more than doubling the original contract with the 198?
That's about 43,000 more.
I
The
thought you were
original
asking
contract was
198. Oops. Go ahead.
Excuse me. The original contract was 155,737. So it's a $43,000 increase from $2,012.
But I just asked you, you're asking for 198,000.
Correct. And then you wanted to know what the original contract was for. That's per year. That 155,737 is per year.
Okay, and so, okay, so 155 for 8 years.
No, for 1 year.
I mean, 1
8
year
years ago.
times 8. You said the term of the contract was 8 years.
Right, but the 155 is for 1 year, 8 years ago.
So did that 155 last for 8 years?
It was only for 1 year.
Okay, so the 198,000 is for how, what's the term of that?
July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2021.
Okay, and that is for 1 year.
Correct.
Where did you get the 43,000 then?
I subtracted 198 or 155 from 198.
Okay, well, I must be getting this wrong. I'm sure I'm not tracking it because you said it was 155 per year. The
For
original
8 years. Yes, correct.
per year. So
Per
we did
year.
155 in the first year, 155 in the second year, and so on.
There was an escalation over those 8 years.
Well, see, that's why cover memos are important because, I mean, I know what you want, but I just hate to drag this on. I'm sorry. But
I'm sorry, Counselor. Down at the bottom on page 1 of 2.
Mr. Flitch, can you let Counselor Vihil Coppler finish with her comment?
down at the bottom of what?
On page 1 of 2 of the summary of contracts dated June 13th, 2012. The total original contract plus amendments was $1,367,482. That was for the entire 8 years.
Wow.
And so we're asking for a 1-year extension for 198,000.
And that's for what? To do what?
They, CCMSI acts as the city's third-party administrator because we are basically self-insured up to $100,000. And to eliminate any bias or anything, we hire a third-party administrator. And so when risk department has a claim, either general liability or workman's compensation, somebody will enter that into our third-party administrator system and they adjudicate those claims. All of our general liability, and if it's over $100,000, then we ship that off to Travelers, our insurance company. So this is for everything up to $100,000 in general liability and everything up to $600,000 in workers' compensation that the city would be liable for.
Okay, I understand it, but I don't want to see this kind of work again. I mean, I think you should have a cover memo. I think you should explain. I don't think you should just assume that we know what you want. And I don't think that the public really understands what you want because it's not outlined. And I believe that's the reason for cover memos, to explain exactly what's going on, what you want, and any history that's implied. And certainly a suggested motion would be helpful. So I'm sorry to give you such a hard time, but this is pretty.
No, thank you, Counselor. Thank you. No, I mean, I should have caught that.
Okay, that's it for me, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
In the presentation that we're going to have in B, I do have the spreadsheet that I'm going to be able to share. And I also have with me Nazarene Kopecki from AJ Gallagher. And Councillor Vigil-Koppler had asked to go over the city's experience when we reviewed the contract or the renewal of our insurance. And so that's what our presentation is tonight, is that she also wanted, I said I was going to show it in finance, and she wanted to make sure that it also was shown in public works. And so A and B are really tied together. They're hand in glove. And so I didn't know when you wanted to show this presentation. But we're prepared to go through that either with item A or item B.
All right, we'll start it with item B. I did have a couple questions. You said it was an 8-year agreement. I thought under state law and under our procurement, we could only go 4 years at a time.
As I understand it, in 2012, we could go 8 years.
8 years, okay. If you could get us that information or have somebody from procurement get us that information, send it to me, that would be great. And then also you said that you didn't have time to go to RFP, which is why you're asking for another extension. So does the law allow us to request an extension if the contract is up?
I believe I ran all this through procurement, Chairman. And I believe that because of when the mayor had issued the state of emergency, that procurement is allowing certain contracts to be done. They have to be done prior to June 30 or July 31st. We only get a 30-day extension to get either to get an extension or to do the RFP.
I guess I'd like to see the language that says what in an emergency situation allows us to either bypass procurement law or state law. And if I can get that, that would be great. Actually, send it to all the committee.
I will, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. What are the wishes on item A?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion for approval by Councilor Lindell, a second by Councilor Abeyta. Any further discussion? Seeing none, can we have a roll call vote, Ms. Martin?
Yes, sir. Chair Christopher Rivera,
Yes.
Councilor Ramona Beta,
Yes.
Councilor Sidney Lindell,
Yes.
Councilor Joanne Vigil-Koppler,
Yes,
Councilor Michael Garcia.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. Next to item B, approval of amendment number 1 to PSA with Arthur J. Gallagher and Company. Councilor Lindell, you pull this one.
Thank you, Chair. I've got the PDF open that we received earlier today. I had requested that we have a look at this. I'm on the first part and the second part, commercial, automotive, and commercial general liability. And I'm looking at the changes through the years, which the percentage change doesn't seem vast at all, really. I'm just wondering if we could be given a little explanation of what, let's just look at the commercial automotive for 1 year and go through the columns on it and have a little discussion on that.
Mr. Flitch, are you able to share your screen?
I can.
While he's doing that, Ms. Nazarene, can you give me the spelling of your first and last name and who you're with again?
Sure, it's Nasreen. Last name Kop as in Paul, Ecky. And I'm with Arthur J. Gallagher.
Thank you.
All right, is what's on the screen what you wanted to look at, Councilor Lindell?
Yes, Chair, thank you.
Nazreen, can you see the screen too? This is row 9. This is for FY or July 1, 2019 through July 1, 2020. For our, that would be the policy term for commercial auto. Could you briefly describe what is in our commercial auto policy? And then let's go through the columns.
Sure, it's covering your auto liability as well as any physical damage for comprehensive and collision damage coverage. So if you hit a third party, that would be.
That includes police, fire, all city departments?
All your vehicles that you have scheduled with the carrier, correct?
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Lindell, did you have questions on this?
I'd like them to go through and explain what's included in each column.
Sure. So, so we've got in each column, we've got the policy term. So what we've done is we've taken the losses that CCMSI, your TPA provided us, and we've put them in a pivot table, a loss stratification table for you to show the city where we're paying out claims, where you're paying out your premiums, and what your loss ratio is. So when we renew your policies, we can, you can kind of tell where the increases are, what the underwriter is looking for. And it kind of helps us provide some training for the city to be able to kind of mitigate some of these losses. And, you know, you're going to have losses. It's, you know, losses are going to happen. It's just trying to mitigate those losses so they don't occur over your retention, and you're able to mitigate what you have in your retention. So your first column A is your policy term. We've only gone back 5 years on this loss strat. We've given you the policy number from Travelers, in this case, autos with Travelers, the carrier name.
Ms. Kopecki,
Yes.
can you hold on a second? Because Brad's
Sure.
email is showing up on the screen.
Oh, sorry.
There you
Okay.
go.
There we go. Okay. Column B again is the policy number from your carrier, which is Travelers, which you will see in column C. We've listed CCMSI as your TPA/Travelers, your insurance company. The column D is the premiums you've paid out per year. Column E and F are E, F, and G actually are all the, we've just broken the claims out by property damage claims, bodily injury claims, medical bills. So we've just the TPAs have broken them out separately like that. And so we've done the same thing. Any lost work, lost wages claim due to an auto accident, all those go under those columns, we've just separated them out. So your column I, sorry, go ahead.
What are expenses paid?
Those are all your expenses that have been paid relating to auto. You know, I can get back to you on that because my loss control gentleman couldn't get on the call today. But I'll ask him what exactly that entails, what kind of expense.
Because if you look at that in 15-16, we had an expenses paid of over $190,000. And this year we had an expenses paid of $557. I mean, it's a, and
Huge
look at
discrepancy.
look at the other years. It's 3,000, 4,000, 1,000. There, I need to know what that is in order to feel comfortable with any of this.
Sure. And I might be able to get back to you even just later. I'll go ahead and text him, you know, later on this meeting, I might be able to get back to you on that too. So I'll go ahead and email him when we get done here. Column I is just the total of all those columns that say paid, so EFG will total to column I of total paid. So, and then column J is your total reserves that the TPA sets for each claim of what they think they'll end up paying on that claim. That's what the reserves column is. Total recoveries is maybe money they've gotten back, the TPA from subrogation, potentially. That's what total recoveries means, or from the insurance company or from wherever that they might have gotten back on that claim that the city didn't have to pay out for. So your total incurred is what has actually been paid out on a claim. After taking into effect all your total paid, all your expenses, you're taking away your, including your reserves and taking away any subrogations or recoveries. That's what total incurred is on column M. Column N is your loss ratio, which is your premium. You're taking your total losses, dividing by your premium to come up with your loss ratio. So your total incurred was $517,000, but your premium was, $418,000, which puts you at a loss ratio of 123%. So anything over 100% is not going to be good, because you are paying out more in losses. The insurance company is paying out more in losses than what they collected in premium. So you never want to see that over 100% ever. But counselor, I will find out what that number is for the 190,000, because that seems like it's skewing up the whole line there. I'll have to get you more detail on that.
So I guess, you know, you look at years like 19 to 20, and we had a premium of over $500,000, and we had a total payout of 137. So
Right.
That comes out to a 27%. At what point do we start to get a discounted premium for having so few losses? I mean, that was a very, very profitable year for the insurance company on us.
So the insurance company doesn't just take into account your losses, they're taking into account, in this case, in 2019, unfortunately, the marketplace turned sour or went down south, and everything started hardening because of, especially in auto, counselor, the business auto market has been hardening for the last couple of years, actually. And that's due to high losses, not just, I mean, we're not talking about the city, we're talking in general. Auto losses have been on the rise. And not only is auto losses on the rise, it's also due to the fact that it's more expensive to repair these autos. It takes longer to have these autos repaired. So when it takes longer, that means you're having to rent other vehicles that the insurance companies having to pay out. Because, you know, it used to be a simple fender bender is no longer a simple fender bender, as we all know. We've got cameras in our cars. We've got a lot of electronics in the car. Police cars have a lot of stuff in it. So it's not, the losses are just very expensive to fix these days. And that's what's causing.
Yeah, I get it, but the losses, our losses are 23% of our premium. So let me ask one more question. What actually are the reserves? Why are the reserves added on to the total paid? Whose reserves are they?
Well, so again, the reserves are set by the TPA, which is CCMSI. And
Who is that?
Your
The
TPA.
contract we just approved.
Yeah.
I didn't hear what he said. What
The
you said,
contract
Brad.
you guys
As
just
a third-party administrator, we just approved their contract in A.
Okay.
So the reserves are what we pay contractually to a company?
No, it's the reserves are set by the TPA in what they think that claim is worth when they open up a claim. And that reserves can change depending on how the claim gets adjusted throughout the life of the claim.
I still don't understand why the reserves would be added on to the
They're yet
payouts.
unpaid claims. They believe that these claims will be filed and we will have to pay them.
Right.
We just haven't paid them yet.
Okay, so do we still have open claims that we think are going to cost us almost $93,000 from last year?
We have a total of 16 claims still open.
Okay,
And there's 3 that are open and from the year with 92,000 in reserves.
okay,
So they could be 3 for 30,000 apiece, or 1 for 95,000 and 2 for 1,000 each.
okay. Thank you for that.
Okay, does that help?
Well, yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you, Brad. Okay, so
Council
that's
Lindell,
the
you
columns
still
for
have,
auto.
Council Lindell, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just, looking at these and, I can yield the floor. I guess the comment that I would have is that it seems like in some of these years, we've paid pretty sizable premiums and not gotten anywhere near in payouts what we've paid in premiums, particularly this last year. That was a very, very profitable year for the insurance company. So, I always think of insurance as spreading cost out over time. And it appears to me that the insurance company does pretty well at covering their costs with a sizable amount of profitability on us. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Councilor Lindell. Councilor Vihil-Coppler, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm looking at the claims experience and the description of these claims on several of the last few pages. And I note that there are a lot of sewage backups and stepping on manhole covers. And then there are a lot, I'm assuming because these are noted and apparently are qualified claims, that some of these are also employee injuries. And one of the things that's always interested me in looking at our experience is what do we learn from this? And, even though these claims, well, some of them are kind of big, but they're still open. If you add it all up over the years, it seems like we should learn from this. Like, you know, obviously we have been talking a lot about wastewater, but we haven't really been talking about our sewer pipes and those things. So what are we learning from that with these payouts of these sewage backups? And the other part of this, what are we learning about manhole covers? Is that something where manhole covers aren't placed back properly and they're wobbly? Is that why people are tripping? I don't know. And then employee injuries, what are we learning about that? And all of these, I don't know if there is a connect to risk management and to our safety officer so that we can gather this data on how we can use it to improve what we have going in the city and maybe make things better or plan for, you know, better infrastructure and so that we can start bringing these claims experiences down. So I don't know. I think Mr. Flitch, if risk management is in finance, is it, or is it in HR? I still don't remember.
Risk management is in finance, counselor.
Okay, and so I'm not sure where the safety officer is located either, but is there some kind of ongoing communication where you all have a review of this data and see, and probably with public works, especially, and utilities, especially with the sewer lines and the manhole covers and all that? What are we doing to be proactive instead of reactive?
Mr. Chairman, Councilor Vigil Koppler, we have a claims committee. So every claim over $15,000 is reviewed by the claims committee. And that's made up of public works, public utilities, finance, HR, city attorney is a discretion or is a non-voting member, and the city manager. And they review all claims over $15,000 and approve all payments from $15,000 to $100,000. Above $100,000, travelers comes in. We're working on and developing a reporting system. Last year that we split risk and safety. Risk went with finance where it had been. Safety went with HR, namely due to safety deals workers' compensation claims. And due to the confidentiality nature of it, the HR director felt it would be better if workers' compensation was dealt with in HR and safety. And so that's where it is last year. And risk was in finance. We are working together to try and figure out how to use this data. We use this data internally to help safety guide what their programming is going to be for the next few months. We also share the data with the departments.
So it doesn't sound to me like there's any real emphasis on how to improve. It's mainly claims review rather than what can we learn from this and how can we translate this into capital improvement projects or specific training. And I don't even know if we have a training officer anymore, not a safety, but training. And, you know, that's the only way this data can be useful. Well, other than where your money's going, but, you know, how can we lessen our claims and keep people safe and keep our infrastructure up to date and know where it's failing? Like example, the sewer backups, you know? So I think that would be something that would be really important, is to not just collect the data and approve claims, but really have a proactive approach to how to get the city moving in the right direction to keep from having these claims these accidents and such be repeated. That's all, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Jones, can you lend anything to Councilor Vihil Coppler's concerns regarding sewer and manhole covers?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I honestly, I do agree with Councilor Vihil Coppler. And we do use this data. So each year wastewater does request to increase the contract amount for root control. So every year we gain not just additional footage that is treated for roots, but retreatment, which is proven to be effective. And so in addition, we have made ordinance change requiring any new construction to have backflow valves installed on any home that comes in. That prevents the stoppage from going into the homes, allowing us to only, so then older homes that are affected by that. Manholes is a little more interesting. I think it is easy to assume that when you see claims for manholes that it is only the sewer manholes, but I would also believe a majority of those, a manhole is really any ring or access into a vault, right from, so that I think that term is used a little loose and kind of groups them together. I think it's actually relatively very few actual sewer manholes that the rings are referring to. I think it's more broad than that. But again, we do use this data. We look at this data is integrated into our GIS system for mapping. It manages how we see our maintenance programs for sewer lines, identify hotspots and what cycle each section of sewer line falls under. Right, again, which lines need more attention. All of that information, along with video camera and assessments, all roll up into a CIP program where we do priority pipeline replacements and high-risk crossings. So really it is all integrated together. We do use this data for decision-making, and we do monitor claims. I sit on the claims committee and feel like most times I vote no. Liability is an interesting thing. And sometimes it does seem like just because maybe we're not liable, the cost, right? The cost of being innocent may be more than the city's willing to pay anyway. And so there's quite a few factors. I apologize for going on, but ultimately I do use this information for decision-driven programs.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Did that help Councilor Vihil Coppler?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
All right, any other questions? All right, seeing none, what are the wishes of the committee?
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion for approval on item B from Councilor Beta, a second from Councilor Vihil Coppler. Any further discussion? Thank you, Ms. Kopecki. Thank you, Mr. Flitch. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Yes, sir. Chair Christopher Rivera,
Yes.
Councilor Romana Beta,
Yes.
Councilor Sidney Lindell,
Yes, and I would like an explanation on that 190,000 figure. Thank you.
sorry, I'm writing my note here. Councilor Joanne Vihil Coppler,
Yes.
Councilor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
motion passes.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. And Brad, if you can send that to all committee members regarding Councilor Lindell's question, that would be great. Thank you.
I will. Thank you.
Next, we're on to item C, consideration of a bill, an ordinance amending section 14-11.4 of the Land Development Code. Councilor Vihil Coppler, you pull this one, as well as Councilor Garcia. Councilor Vihil Coppler, you can go first.
Okay, I had just a few questions and I want to thank Eli because we had almost an hour conversation and it was very helpful. The first thing I want to say is that for anybody in the public who's wondering what we're doing here, and that was something that I wanted to ensure myself, which is why I had the conversation with Eli, and that is that we are working solely on the civil fines and not the short-term rental ordinance itself. And that may have been and may not have been the reason for the public comment we got earlier. But I do know that, we will be considering the short-term rental specifics to the ordinance, the changes to the ordinance in future discussions. So that being said, while we're just considering the fines here, I have some questions about the fines themselves. And I guess they start on page 4 of the actual ordinance changes. And, they go with 100, 200, and 500. And I'm wondering about the timing of these. Do they start like $100 when somebody gets cited the first time? And does that mean the next day, if they don't fix it and I mean, kick somebody out that might be renting on that day because they're found to be illegal for whatever reason, do they get $100 a day, or do they? And that goes for the 200 and 500. But I'll just say with the 100, or is that per occurrence? Like, how would this work in real life with timing?
Mr. Isaacson.
Thank you, Chairman Rivera, Councilor Vigil Koppler. I'd also like Sally to chime in on this too. But so it's each offense is a finable offense that can be interpreted in different ways, as you mentioned, Councilor Vigil Koppler. It can be each day that we find a unit that's operating without the proper licensure or registration permit, or it could be, imposed, as we catch somebody operating without the proper approvals, we could fine them for, that, say, the duration of that rental period, and then charge future penalties if they continue to rent to new guests moving forward. So there is some discretion there and some flexibility. But I think Sally can speak to the specifics of that with more clarity.
Ms. Paez, do you have anything to add?
Chair Rivera, Councilor Vigil Koppler. The way it's written is intended to be flexible so that it could apply to violations of the land use code that may not necessarily be a short-term rental violation. The way that it's written, it says that each act subject to a civil fine constitutes a separate civil violation. For violations that can be remedied within 1 day, each day after receipt of notice of violation constitutes a separate civil violation. So
where are you reading that? I'm sorry.
I am on, no problem. I'm in the redlined draft of the ordinance. It's a page, so in terms of the PDF, I don't know. I haven't gotten the prime gov training, so okay, I could share the screen. Would that be?
No, because I'd like to just spend time getting my questions answered. And
sure, it is in the ordinance. It's paragraph C2 of the ordinance.
Okay, so but specific to short-term rentals, let's say I have one and I've got it rented out for 5 days, and I'm on the second day. And I don't know, I think, do I get something in the mail, or does somebody actually knock on the door and give me a citation?
So the notice provisions are in here too. And they say, let's see, delivery. The civil citation shall be posted on the property in a conspicuous place, semicolon, so these are options. Delivered in person or mailed by certified mail, return receipt requested to the last known address of the applicant, permittee, owner, operator of a short-term rental unit, and or tenant as applicable. So there's multiple terms of delivery. I think it would depend on the type of violation and the situation and the circumstances, which method of delivery you might want to use. I mean, if it's like you have built a fence without a permit and we can mail it to you, and that's one violation, you can mail it out. And you're going to fine them once, you can mail it. If it's, you want to go to the door and knock, because there's an ongoing thing, I think you could do it immediately.
Okay, I'm just asking my questions as how they would relate to the short-term rental ordinance. Okay, so if someone knocked on the door and posted a fine on the door, and I'm on day 2 of my rental agreement with tenants, do I get $100 for that day and then $100 the next day and then so on? Or is that 100 period, do I kick them out that day to avoid $100 for the following day? How will that work in real life? Or short-term rentals?
Did you want to answer that, Director Isaacson, or do you want me to?
Go ahead and continue, Ms. Paez, and maybe I'll jump in at the end.
Okay. I think that it depends on the circumstances. In your example, it would be up to the land use department to decide. So there would be an enforcement officer. Probably they would go out, and in that situation, I think you would want to contact the permittee. So I think you would be sending a certified mail to the permittee, and I think you would be waiting. If it's permitted short-term rental, or if it's an unpermitted short-term rental, you don't have that. It would just depend on, do they have a permit? How do we get to that person? How do we actually contact the person that's renting this out? But because it's written in terms of being able to remedy it in one day, I think that if you've got somebody in there for 5 days and you can't get a hold of the owner, like, we're not going to go in and drag out a renter, and I don't think it's reasonable to expect somebody to remedy that within the first day. So I would think that would be a single $100 fine for renting it out. Maybe if it's 2 weeks or something, to where you have time to get them out of there and you really have made that contact and made that notice. But if it's just like a 2 or 3 day rental, and I would think that would be a single violation, because you can't really remedy that in a single day. You've got people in there.
Well, that sounds reasonable, but I understand that there's going to be different code enforcement officers issuing these. So how are we going to provide for fairness?
So I think, thank you, Chairman Rivera, Councilor Vihil-Coppler. I think what your first question highlights, and I think the second question also touches on the same topic, is we need to, I think, within the land use department, we will need to establish a set of policies governing how these citations are issued. We now have the technology to track the citations, both using our EnerGov software and other tools available to us here at the city now. We'll be able to do a good job of tracking. I think you may have noticed in the draft ordinance, there's a provision that tracks these violations within a 36-month period. So if we see that people are habitual offenders, I think that may also impact how we apply these provisions. So if you're a first-time offender renting without the proper permits and licenses, you may get a fine for that. As Ms. Paez alluded to, that whole rental period may be subject to one fine. But if you're someone we're dealing with on a constant basis, the sort of interval at which we are issuing citations may increase. So I think it really depends on situation to situation, and I think our enforcement officers will be given guidance through policies around civil penalties that we have yet to finalize and train to.
Okay, thank you. I'm glad to hear that you'll be at least creating some parameters for violations so that we have some semblance of the city treating people as much as we can, because we won't know everything at the time, but treating them fairly. Like when we give parking tickets, everybody's treated fairly. It's right there, black and white. I realize we can't quite be black and white on this, but it would be great if we could at least be fair, because a lot of people out there are watching how the city's treating this, and this is going to be new, and so it's just good to get off on the right foot.
Yes, I think if black and white is not achievable, we at least hope to reduce it to as few shades of gray as possible, and to apply these provisions as fairly.
Thank you.
I agree.
And then the next question I have is with regard to hearing officers. We have many ordinances where hearing officers are required. And in a council meeting at one time, I recalled the hearing officers actually being appointed by district court. Now this certainly could be different. I don't know why the other requires that and this doesn't, but even if it doesn't, what pool of hearing officers that are familiar with, real estate and even other items that this will cover, where are you going to get those hearing officers? Do we have a list or something?
Ms. Paez, that might be something for the attorney's office.
Chairman Rivera, Councilor Vihil-Cobbler. It is a good question. I know that in the past, we've talked about trying to get a better pool in terms of whether it would be one pool that could do a variety of different types of proceedings or whether they would be more specific to the land use context. I'm not sure. We haven't talked about it. Typically what we would do is put an ad in like the bar bulletin and look for contract attorneys to come on. As you noted, there are a lot of ordinances that do require them. And an alternative that we didn't take in this draft, but I think could be potentially worth further consideration is something like what Albuquerque has, is a full independent office of hearings where they have a full pool and more specific qualifications about what those officers need. They have to be like 5 years of law practice and a variety of other things. But because we weren't sure how big our program was going to be and whether we really had the volume needed to do something that sort of citywide, that proposal we haven't made that proposal at this time. But I think that would be another way to do it. I know that the city attorney was working with another attorney in our office who's not there anymore, but they had been looking into sort of how to create a bit of a pool and whether they could work on an array of things, including the liquor stuff and other items as well or not. So it's to be determined at this time.
Thank you. I would like to make a suggestion, and that is, advertising, maybe letters of interest, since we really don't know how often we would need this, but I would suggest that they be hearing officers familiar with and having experience with land use of some sort. And because it is different. And just as a counterpart, I mean, the First Judicial District Court often goes out for RFPs for mediators. They have another list for alternative dispute resolution people. They have guardian ad litems, and they go out to create a pool of people experienced in the legal world with the types of programs that they'll be working with. And I think it would behoove the city to have a cadre of people, of attorneys that you can rely on maybe to come in and conduct some hearings and have some experience in this field. That's just my 2 cents. Maybe it's 5 cents, but I'll say 2 for now. And I believe that is all I have, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Vihil-Cobbler. Councilor Garcia, you also pull this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Quick question, just because I would have to look at so on page 3, line 3, item B, fines imprisonment, just for clarification, because we've laid out fines, what potential imprisonment might come along with these penalties?
Thank you, Chair Rivera. Councilor Garcia, the fines and imprisonment is an existing provision that's already in there, and it would be up to our jurisdiction as a municipality, which is set by the Constitution, And so we are allowed to impose criminal fines of up to $500 and up to 6 months imprisonment for violations of pretty much any of our ordinances. It's treated as a criminal matter. So that would fall just within our regular criminal jurisdiction, and those are things that would be prosecuted in municipal court, and a defendant in municipal court could then appeal to the First Judicial District Court.
Okay, and just for clarification, that would be at the discretion of the land use director.
Thank you, Councilor Garcia. In terms of a violation of Chapter 14, there's some discretion of the land use department in terms of issuing a notice of violation and in terms of filing the citation in municipal court. But once it's in municipal court, we do have a prosecutor there. So he would be, under our current structure, he would be the person to take that across the finish line in municipal court and has his own prosecutorial discretion in terms of settling with the defendant, dismissing the case if he doesn't think there's sufficient evidence to pursue it, taking it before the judge and to the conclusion of the case. So it's sort of the initiation is within the discretion of the land use department, but then it would bump over to the municipal court.
Okay, thank you. And given that this was in the ordinance before, any background info why we would propose for imprisonment? I mean, can an example be given of why we might propose somebody be put in jail?
Thank you, Councilor Garcia. It's a good question. I am not aware of any instance of us ever imprisoning anyone for a land use code violation. I would be surprised to hear of one. I think that would be very unusual, and I'm not aware of it ever happening. But again, once you get to that stage of the criminal penalty, that's a matter for the judge. So that would really be out of our hands, but I'm not aware of that ever happening for a land use code violation. It's more of a general authority for any ordinance violation that the city can go up to those maximum penalties under the law.
Okay. The individual who gave public comment earlier brought up a question that I've received a lot lately is why aren't the current permit holders being notified of these changes? Is it typical to notify license holders or any stakeholders in this instance?
So thank you, Chairman Rivera, Councilor Garcia. I think there's nothing precluding us from notifying existing permit holders. I think part of the reason they haven't been notified yet is that the proposed amendments are still going through the public process, and we aren't sure yet what the final version of these amendments will look like. We have
Eli, can I stop you for a second? You're a little bit hard to hear, so if you can get closer to it.
Okay, I apologize. Is this better?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we haven't notified existing permit holders because we are still in the process of drafting the proposed amendments. There's nothing to say that once these are finalized, we wouldn't then notify people of the new rules moving forward. I think it's also important to note that everything that's being discussed both here tonight and that will be discussed moving forward with the other bill that's currently being revised are prospective. And so those changes will impact new permit holders, not permit holders that have already registered or have a permit listed with the city. So I think that those are maybe two reasons why that outreach hasn't happened yet. I think also we were using the both planning commission and then this council committee process to notify folks that our current ordinances are being re-examined and looked at and possibly changed. And as I said earlier, once those changes are adopted, we would then notify permit holders of the changes and how it may impact them forward.
Okay, thank you, Eli. I appreciate that. That kind of a follow-up comment in regards to that of notifying the public, and for the counselors that weren't on the quality of life committee last week, I had proposed that we implement this at a staggered pace in regards once this passes, this would take effect 30 days after passage. Reason being that majority of the public is not paying attention to this in most instances. And, you know, when we make changes where there are civil penalties, we do have a delayed enforcement, so to speak. You know, for example, with the animal ordinance that just went into effect, I think yesterday or today, that we had that delay. So I think it's prudent of us to have that delay for this. Additionally, I think because the enforcement process is not in place, I think that's been the biggest challenge of this whole process is enforcement. So not only having these structures in place, what we're trying to put with these changes, but there's the other hand, which is who is going to enforce it. So that's why I am proposing we still have a 30-day after effect, because it'll allow us to get that in order as well. I guess this is a question for Sally. So with that proposal, do I have to submit a formal amendment to implement this 30 days after passage? Or how can we go about that?
Thank you, Chairman Rivera. Councilor Garcia, I'm honestly not sure. My recommendation is that we work through our legislative liaison office. Jesse and Jeff, I think, would have the best recommendations. Certainly that's I think that's the way we would do it, is to incorporate an amendment sheet. I'm not sure how we normally incorporate an effective date into a bill, if there's a special way that we do that. That's a bit of kind of legislative magic that I haven't done. So it's easy enough, I'm sure. So my recommendation would be to work with Jesse and Jeff to incorporate that.
Okay, thank you, Sally. I really appreciate that. Just
Sorry,
because
I
I
don't
do
know more.
think it's totally fine, and that's why I'm asking the question, just because I want to make sure we go through this process and include at least what I think is fair to the public, and it'll allow us to get everything in order on our end as well, given this is going to be a huge change for the city. Lastly, in regards to same vein as Councilor Vihil-Coppler's comments in regards to first fine, how does that affect future fines? My kind of follow-up to that is, how does it affect an individual who's going through the hearing process? So let's say an individual who, for some reason or another, is issued a fine, and they want to request a hearing, and that is not, they're not going to get a hearing the next day. And so how are we going to ensure that the code enforcement team is not racking up fines against somebody, which means an individual is going to have two subsequent hearings? What is the process for that? Because we want to make sure that we don't create a somewhat of a complicated mixed spaghetti effect where person's getting fined, they're appealing it, and while they're waiting for their hearing, they get 4 other fines.
Thank you, Chairman Rivera, Councilor Garcia. I think, you know, as you mentioned, I think there's a whole suite of policy and procedure decisions that need to be made. That this is certainly one of those questions. I know Sally will have some information as to, you know, what legally happens if a case is before a hearing officer, but I don't think we want to be in a situation where we're having people racking up new penalties while we're still resolving old ones. But again, there will be situations where that if someone is flagrantly sort of flaunting the rules, that we don't necessarily want to take that option completely off the table either. And so I think A, we need to put some concrete policies and procedures together. B, we need to leave some flexibility to treat everything as a case matter so that we are being effective in our enforcement. And then I think C, we need to make sure we're doing things that are you know, legally hold water. And
Okay. Yeah, I think it's very prudent of us to have these policies in place before we start issuing fines to folks, because we want to ensure that our team on our end is fully working within the appropriate structure. Because what would really be challenging is if we roll this out and we don't have the structure in place, that it just becomes more of a challenging situation for you know, a department that is kind of stressed, to use your words, where you're understaffed, so to speak. Another reason to have this rollout be a minimum of 30 days after effect, after potential passage of this. I think that's all the questions I have at the moment, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Vihil Coppler. You had your hand up for a follow-up question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I heard you say, Eli, that, you know, we didn't send letters to the permit holders because we're going through our public process, but permit holders are also the public. And so I know it's probably unwieldy to send all these letters, and, you know, we're not really in the office and all that stuff, but there is one positive thing about doing that, and that is, even if you have, I think you have a list of people who are illegal, and if we sent the letters to everybody, you're not only for the reasons that Councilor Garcia says, which are good reasons, but the other part of it is that you're more apt to gain compliance. You know, people don't want to get caught, and even if they have a permit, they don't want to be in non-compliance and pay a fine. So, you know, it's sort of like the adage, you get more whatever you get with honey rather than whatever else. I need to learn those things. But anyway, you know, it's being proactive. And so when you do that kind of thing, and I'm sure this won't be the last thing that the city does when we change things, but the more you notify and communicate up front, the better you are to get people to agree to do it, and you get more compliance. And so, you know, maybe the non-permit holders will say, hey, I better wake up and I better, you know, stop doing this and apply for my permit. And so hopefully, you know, that would happen. But anyway, those are just my 2 cents. And I agree with the delayed implementation. Give people a chance to get their act together, and then hit them with some fines. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lindell, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to make a couple of quick comments here. I would find it very, very hard to believe that anyone operating a short-term rental at this point in time in this city doesn't know that they are supposed to have a permit. They have blatantly operated without a permit. They have cheated us out of our revenues. And I just find it impossible to believe that anyone doesn't know that you are supposed to be permitted to be operating a short-term rental. That would be a story that I would find unbelievable. We have had article upon article upon article in the newspaper about short-term rentals and permits. So that one really doesn't hold much water with me, that people don't know that they're supposed to have a permit. And there are people that have operated short-term rentals in this town for years and not paid us 1 penny in gross receipts tax or in occupancy tax. And that's cheating us, pure and simple. So those are my comments on that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lindell. Councillor Vihil Coppler, you have your hand up again.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I can sympathize with Councillor Lindell's comments. I do think there are some people who do know that they should have a permit, but I mean, if you look at permitting across this city, not just short-term rentals, and you can ask Eli, because there's a bunch of communication I've had with them. There are people all over this city who are working on their houses without permits, and they don't know. and they get red tagged. And so the only people who are enforcing this are their neighbors. So that's kind of what's happening with short-term rentals. But there are people who don't know, and I think we need to give the benefit of the doubt, because that's not our place right now. What our place is to make sure they know, that we know, and that we're going to impose fines. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And a follow-up to that is, I think what those folks, what the broader community doesn't know is the fees that are going to be implemented. Unfortunately, the city has not enforced our rules in the past. And I think that in some essence has left a lot of community members saying, oh, they don't care. They're not going to do anything about it anyway. So we're changing our attitude in regards to we do care, and we are going to come after you, and we are going to fine you. And I think we owe it to the community to say, hey, look, we're changing the rules. This is your warning, because after that, you're going to be paying a financial penalty, or in some extreme cases, maybe even imprisonment. And that's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Lindell, since you're one of the sponsors of the ordinance, I'll give you the last word, or if you just want to make a motion, I'll entertain that.
I'll make a motion to approve. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We have a motion to approve item C. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Beta. Any further discussion? We have a roll call vote, Ms. Martin.
Yes, sir. Chair Christopher Rivera,
Yes.
Councilor Romana Beta,
Yes.
Councilor Signe Lindell,
Yes.
Councilor Joanne Vigil Koppler, Councilor Joanne Vigil Koppler,
Yes.
Councilor Michael Garcia.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Next, we're on to item D, which was pulled by Councilor Vigil Koppler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Oops. I just have some questions about the practicality of the nuisance ordinance. And one thing came to mind. It does say, I think somewhere, and I'm sorry, I'm kind of scattered here, but somewhere in here it says it defines what a gathering is, and it says 2 or more people or something, but there is one person right now in District 2 causing a major ruckus, and it's still happening to this day, and this should apply to him, and it doesn't seem like it would. And here's an example. At 2, 3, 4 in the morning, every single night, this person goes outside and starts yelling obscenities and hitting metal upon metal. And all the neighbors go outside and scream at him to be quiet. And there's big, words exchanged back and forth every night in the middle of the night, District 2. So that's a nuisance, but this wouldn't apply. So I would be interested in working with the definition so that it can be more broad to help that. And so there's that. And then the next thing is, is there somewhere in here where vacant land is a nuisance because the owner doesn't keep the land free of people that encroach, that do drugs, alcohol, prostitution, camp out, set up tents? We have several of those around the city where the owner doesn't know that people are using the vacant land for all that stuff. And I get a lot of calls on this, and I know that the police department reports, but they just have the ability to shoo them away, and then they come back. And the police department's answer is, we can't do anything about it. There's no strength in the law to do anything about it for the landowner. So, and then another one is where people are living in campers in driveways in established neighborhoods. They're actually living there and get extension cords that run out to the camper. So, oh, and then I have one more thing. Where does the letter get sent? The letter of violation? It doesn't really say where the letter goes. I think that's page 13, line 7.
Miss Fabian or Mr. Prince, do you guys want to take a stab at that?
Yeah, I can take a first stab, and then if Mr. Prince wants to jump in with some more of the legal implications of these. So I made some notes. So a single person, Councilor Vihel-Coppler, making a ruckus would apply under our current definition. So we were very careful to keep the definition fairly broad so that we aren't limiting the things that could be a nuisance, because a lot of different things could be a nuisance. Really, an undefinable amount of things can be nuisances. And so we do have this item E that's pretty much a catch-all for anything that would affect their neighbors, essentially, that interferes with the exercise or enjoyment of public rights, including the right to use public or private property.
I'm sorry, what page is that?
I'm looking at the brief that is attached. It's in the very first section of the brief. In the actual ordinance, it's in the definition of a nuisance. So let me find that.
Page 3.
Yeah, it's item E. So it's on page 6, line 25 on the actual nuisance ordinance. It kind of spans page 6 and 7. So basically, this is our catch-all, that if it's causing a disruption and causing a harm and disrupting the peace and safety of the neighborhood, then it could be designated a nuisance in the internal investigation.
Okay. I don't know if that's enough, but.
Well, we can let Mike speak to how they would apply that legally. Would you like me to continue going, or do you want Mike to comment on that?
Well, I want to just be sure, because that it flows, because I'm not sure it flows to do what you want it to say. Constituent complaint. Is that where it starts?
Mr. Prince, do you concur with Ms. Fabian?
Yes, thank you, Chair Rivera, Councilor Vihel-Coppler. I do agree with Ms. Fabian's assessment of the scope of this proposed change to the nuisance ordinance. I do think that even in a condition or a situation where there's just a single person who is the cause of the nuisance, that we still could, under the section noted by Ms. Fabian, we still could move ahead and have the property declared as a nuisance. I think there's actually, I think there's a fair amount of, what's the word? I guess, I think the ordinance has been well drafted to encompass a lot of different situations, either with a single person or multiple people. I don't have really many concerns on that respect, but I do understand your point, and that's something I'll we'll look into or consider. But I don't have concerns that we still couldn't pursue a single individual living in a property as being a nuisance.
Thank you, Mr. Prince. Councilor Vihel-Coppler, does that satisfy, or do you have more questions?
Well, one of the things that, let's say with this man that causes that disturbance every night, when the police get there, and it's not only this instance, but many others, they won't do anything because the person wasn't caught in the act. Yet every neighbor around them is up every night telling them to shut up. So how would that how could this have enough strength to address that?
Thank you, Counselor, Mr. Chair. I think one of the great things about this new rewrite is that we are expanding the scope of what a nuisance can be, and basically where a nuisance triggers, as we're calling them, or incidents that we're calling them officially, are being drawn from. So the way it's written currently, the current ordinance, basically police have to determine on the scene if it's a nuisance, which is very difficult to ask police to do because they don't necessarily have the record of the property in front of them. They're not necessarily looking at the data over time, because that ultimately is what a nuisance is. It's problems over time and it's chronic properties. So the nice thing about this ordinance is that we are now pulling from constituent calls and complaints. We're pulling from land use violations, and we're pulling from police record and police calls and fire calls as well. And so we're trying to get a more holistic picture of what nuisances are and proactively catch them by having this 6-month period where if you have 6 of any of those, any combination of those different incidences, you'll be flagged as a nuisance. And we can do the internal investigation, determine if a nuisance actually exists. That gives us a little bit of discernment, because there could be times where there's 6 calls to a house that isn't necessarily a nuisance, or there could be instances where they're severe in nature, and less than 6 calls would constitute a nuisance. And so then we move forward in the process, the abatement process, and engage with those homeowners and those property owners to abate the nuisance.
Well, it says here that it's pretty broad, where it keeps them from enjoying their property. So in this instance, it keeps them from enjoying their sleep inside their property. So if there's 10 calls, I mean, who's going to investigate and then interview the neighbors and find corroboration that this probably does exist? Is that something the police department will do, or who actually will do this?
Thank you for the question, Counselor, Mr. Chair. Right now, that's going to be housed in constituent services because it is across departments. And so basically what we're working on right now, it's a manual process. So basically every single week, legal, code enforcement, PD, Christine Mahalsick, the Director of Constituent Services, and the Constituent Services Specialist, Isabella Sharp, have a weekly meeting, and they discuss these properties that are getting a lot of hits, a lot of calls across the departments. Eventually, we are looking to do kind of an automatic notification system. So having these databases pooled into one notification system, so that if any one address hits 6 across the board, across these 3 different basically triggering departments, then it will trigger, it'll send an email, it'll notify us to look into it, but it will be housed in constituent services. We made the decision not to define a department in the ordinance to ensure its longevity, so that we can adapt if there's city structure, if there's reorg, if things get shuffled around. We wanted to be sure that we wouldn't have to amend the ordinance. So right now it'll be housed in constituent services, and it is already housed in constituent services. That is a task that Isabella and Christine currently do, and it will remain there.
That sounds more like it could work on property that's messed up or, trashed out. But this man, I have to go back to this man, because this truly is something that this ordinance should address, because it is a nuisance. This man has mental problems, and he probably has weapons. So do you all in constituent services feel comfortable going and visiting him?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Counselor. So we would not be visiting them. Yeah, we would refer issues of public safety to public safety experts. We're not going, if there's a call, we don't go out. We address those issues as they come in within those departments. So if someone's calling the police on this man, the police would still go out and make that visit and create the report if they end up writing a report. And basically we are comparing the data in the back end after these instances happen. And then part of the investigative process internally to constituent services is to contact neighbors that have complained. It is to look at the severity of the police calls and the police reports. If there are land use cases, looking at if they were resolved, if they are ongoing. So we're trying to be a bit more comprehensive so that we can address nuisances on a case-by-case basis, but be more proactive about identifying them.
Well,
So instead of just, sorry, go ahead.
I appreciate your answers. We've waited a long time for something like this to put some teeth in it. And I was just hoping for more immediacy because people have waited a very long time to get some teeth into this. And I'm hearing, and I understand what you're saying, but I'm hearing it's more of a, a little more bureaucracy is still in there rather than immediate action. And I was hoping we could, be like the short-term rental civil fines. You go out there and you slap a red tag or something, something needs to happen in the more immediate because, so I think it, I don't know. I just think it needs more action, immediate action than what we have. Those are all my comments, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, what are the wishes of the committee?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion for approval by Councilor Lindell, a second by Councilor Garcia. Any further discussion? We have a roll call vote, Ms. Martin?
Yes, sir. Chair Christopher Rivera,
Yes.
Councilor Romana Beta,
Yes.
Councilor Sidney Lindell,
Yes.
Councilor Joanne Beho Coppler,
Yes.
Councilor Michael Garcia.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. Next round of matters from staff. Anything from Mr. Jones? Is he
I have
still
nothing,
on?
Mr. Yes, sir. I have nothing more, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Romero?
Nothing from my end, Mr. Chair.
All right. Anything from Ms. Pasula or Ms. Ray Diaz?
I have nothing for you, Mr. Chairman.
No, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Matters from the committee. Anything the committee would like addressed?
Oh, Mr. Chair, I do. I just want to state that with the veterans banners, some of you may have noticed that the flags are starting to break off. I want you to know that we do know about it and we are investigating better material to keep that from happening. We've got great cooperation from the police department because many people have rolled up the flags and taken them to the police department, or they rolled them up and put them by the poles, and the police officers are going and picking them up. So we do know about it and we're taking steps to improve upon it. So if any of you have any emails or questions from anyone, thank you for at least knowing the procedure and asking them to take them to the police department. They're keeping them for us. So thank you.
Thank you. Anything else from committee? Matters from the chair. The only thing I have is our next meeting is Monday, July 27th. Thank you all for a great meeting and we'll see you then. See you on Wednesday. Thank you, Ms. Martin. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.